Welcome back to another video lesson. This is lesson 2.5, where we're going to be comparing fractions, decimals, and percents. You received 2 pages of notes in class. One is a light yellow, one is like a gold yellow. On your table of contents page, I'd like you to fill out page 38 and 39, and the title is the title of the lesson, Compare and Order Fractions, Decimals, and Percents. Go ahead and fill that in. You will need to trim just the bottom and the right-hand side of those 2 pages for them to fit after we're done taking notes. So page 38, the first one we're going to grab is that light yellow. And we're just going to talk about fractions on this page, and then the second one is comparing all different types, fractions, decimals, and percents. So let's just talk about fractions first. When you're comparing 2 fractions, there's 2 different strategies you can use to compare. And by compare, I mean, is one less or greater than the other, or are they the same? So let's just do a quick review over on the side of the symbols that we're going to need to use. So this symbol is the greater than symbol. I'd like you to draw the greater than symbol and label it greater than. 2 things you can do. You could think of it as an alligator eating the bigger number, or you could also do 2 dots on the side of the bigger number and 1 dot on the side of the smaller number. To figure out how to draw them, you connect the dots like that. The opposite symbol pointing towards the left is the less than symbol. And again, you can think of it as the alligator eating the bigger number on the right, and the bigger number gets the 2 dots on the right, and then the smaller number gets the 1 dot on the left, and then you just connect them. Obviously, we're also going to be dealing with fractions that are equal to each other, so we have that one as well. Strategy number 1 is to get a common denominator. The quick way to do that from our fraction review is to take these 2 denominators and multiply them together to get a common denominator of 40. So what's going to happen is we're going to multiply this 3/5 by 8 over 8. On the left-hand side, I'm going to write times 8.8, and I'm just going to go this way. 3 times 8 is 24. 8 times 5 is 40. So now this 3/5 we've changed to have a denominator of 40. Let's do the other fraction. We want to have a denominator of 40 as well. So we're going to use the 5 and bring it over here. This is a form of 1. That's why the equivalent fractions work. And we are going to be having 10 over 24 on the right. Now we can compare these fractions because the denominators are the same. So we look at the numerators, and the bigger numerator is the bigger fraction if the denominators are the same. Did I mention the denominators have to be the same? Good. So what we have here is a fraction that's bigger on the left-hand side, so that's going to get my 2 dots. The fraction on the right is smaller, so that's going to get my 1 dot, and then I'm going to connect them. That's a greater than. We read this, 3/5 is greater than 2/8. In order to tell, we need common denominators. The second strategy you could use to see if 2 fractions are the same, greater, or less than each other is this idea called cross products. So cross products is really cool. You are going to cross over from the denominator of one to the numerator of the other. You have to, this is very, very important. Listen. You have to start from the denominator and go up towards the numerator of the other fraction. So I'm going to draw an arrow. I want you to do this as well. Start at the 5, do a dot, and then go up to the 2. That's where you have to start. And what is 5 times 2? 5 times 2, 10. Now do the same, but we're going to start at the 8, dot at the 8, and then go up to the 3. So what's 8 times 3? 24. The reason you have to start at the denominator is if you went the other way, you would have the 10 over here and the 24 over here, and that is not accurate. If you look, these are the numerators that we got once we found common denominators. So the 24 has to be referring to the 3/5 on this side, and then the 10, notice they're matching, is up over on the right. So you get the same answer, but using cross products as a strategy to do it. Okay, moving down that page, we're now going to talk about ordering fractions. What is a good strategy to do is think about fractions in respect to, are they close to 0, are they close to 1, or are they close to half? So I have those categories here, and I have about 6, there we go, 6 fractions over here that we're actually going to order, in order from least to greatest. Sometimes directions say greatest to least, so make sure you're being careful reader so you know which way we're going to order them. Today we're going to go from least to greatest for this example. So I'm going to look at my fractions and I'm going to find one that I know is either close to 0, close to 1, or close to half. And I'm noticing this one right here. And so this is the first one I'm going to talk about. 5/10 is exactly 1/2. So it's very, very, very close to half. It equals half. So I'm going to put that in that category. As I'm looking down, I also notice that when the numerator and denominator are very close to each other, that's almost 1/2. So 8/8 is 1/2. 7/8 is very close to 8/8. So that's going to be the second one I'm going to put, probably going to be close to 1/2. Now I have to look at any fraction that I think is on the 0 end of the categories. Is there any fraction that's really close to 0? I'm looking at 1/6. If I had 6 pieces, that would be a whole, but I only have 1 of them. So that's actually going to be my third fraction I'm going to categorize. I think 1/6 is close to 0. That leaves 3 left. When we are trying to decide where fractions go, another thing to think about is, are they higher than 1/2 or lower than 1/2? And you can look at the denominator and split it to see. So I'll give you an idea. This 1/4 is lower than 1/2 because half of 4 is 2. So 2/4 is 1/2. 1/4 has to be below that. So it's going to be somewhere in here. 2/6, half of 6 is 3. So halfway is 3/6. This has to be also lower than half. So I'm going to put 2/6 over in this area. Again, we're just categorizing. And that leaves 3/5. When it's odd, it's a little bit trickier because half of 5 is 2.5. And since 3 is higher than 2.5, we know that this fraction, 3/5, is somewhere in between half and 1/2. So it's just a strategy to categorize fractions, and now we're going to put them on the number line so we order them from least to greatest. So we're going to compare fractions that are similar at the end. So the ones that we know for sure, we're 5/10 smack dab in the middle, 1/6 over on the left, and 7/8 over by 1. We are pretty certain that 3/5 is going to go in between these because there's no other fractions in our list to order. So I'm going to put that one in between 5/10 and 7/8. But now we have an issue with these two. We don't know exactly yet which one comes first, 1/4 or 2/6. So in order to compare fractions that are similar, they're close to each other on this number line, but we want to know which one comes first when we're ordering them. We could, now that we have 2 fractions, get a common denominator or do cross products like we did up on the first part of the sheet. So down here I'm actually just going to rewrite 1/4 and 2/6 side by side so I can do that cross product trick again. So 4 times 2 is 8, 6 times 1 is 6. So the 8 is bigger, that means 2/6 is bigger than 1/4. Now I can place them on my number line, 1/4 and then 2/6. We have now ordered our fractions. I'm just going to put commas in between them from least to greatest. That's going to be a skill that we're going to practice tomorrow. Now our second page, that golden page, is going to be dealing with percents, decimals, and fractions, and how do we compare those. The big idea, sorry for my green squiggle, I think it's a typo, it's not. The big idea is that you cannot order percents, decimals, and fractions unless you have something, and so I want you to put in cannot. You cannot order unless you have the same form. They all have to be decimals, they all have to be percents, and they all have to be fractions in order for you to compare them. But that's the big idea when we're comparing all three. So we're going to do some examples. So Harold found that 3/5 of his class prefers vanilla ice cream, 26% prefer chocolate, and 0.14 or 14/100 prefers strawberry. What kind of ice cream do students prefer the least? So I'm going to mark up my problem. You do the same. I'm circling the important numbers. I want to box this word least, and I want to underline or mark up which kind, because we're not looking for a number at the end, we're looking for a kind of ice cream at the end of this. So because these are all three different kinds of numbers, we have a fraction, a percent, and a decimal, we have to pick one. It is easier to compare decimals, so that's the way I'm going to show you. But you are perfectly fine to turn all of these into fractions and even turn all of these into percents and compare that way. So 3/5 as a decimal, we have to get the 5 to be a 10. We're going to multiply by 2 to get that. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6/10 is the decimal, 0.6. So I did 3/5. I already have this as a decimal, so my next job is to take the 26%, turn it to a decimal. And so I'm going to take the number 26, here's the decimal point, move it over 2 places. It's no longer after the 6, it's in front of the 2. So that means I have 0 and 26/100. Now I have all three decimals. Here's a trick when you're trying to compare them. You have to look at the decimal point places, and I'm going to put them right one on top of the other so that I can just look at the tenths place. And since they all have different numbers, I can stop and look at the smallest number, and that will be the least that I'm looking for. So that is the 14/100. Then I look back into my problem. What kind of ice cream was that? That is strawberry. So my answer, which kind of ice cream do students prefer the least, is strawberry. And that is done. Example 2, we're going to be comparing Cora. She spends 2/3 of her free time blogging on the internet, and Leanne spends 60% of her free time blogging on the internet. Who spends more of her free time blogging? So we only have 2 to compare now. 2/3 is actually one of those fractions that we can't get into a 10 or 100. So that means we really have to divide. The numerator goes on the inside, the denominator goes on the outside, and 3 times 6 is 18. When I subtract, I get a 2, and I have to annex a 0. But I'm noticing it's 20 again, so I need another 6, and I need another 18, and oh my goodness, I'm getting another 2. If I were to annex again, I'd get another 6, and another 18, and another 2. I'm noticing that this will never change. That means that this decimal is going to repeat forever and ever and ever. Little review, a repeating decimal gets the shortcut with this line over the 6. Whatever repeats gets that little line over that number. So we know that we could write a 6, 6, 6, 6, 6 all the way and never stop, or we could do the shortcut 0.6 with a line over it. So that is our fraction. Now we have to do our percent. 60% as a decimal without the percent sign is 60. Move it over twice, and we have 0.60. Now, in order to compare, I do want to write these one over the other to show you that sometimes the tens place is the same. So notice I used 2 of the 6's so that I can compare the hundredths place to find which one belongs more. That would be the 2/3. Who was the 2/3? It was Cora, so our answer is Cora spends more time blogging on the internet. So sometimes you're going to have to compare the tens place on our example 1, but others time you're going to have to look to the next place value place where the numbers are different to compare. Here is a bonus question for you. I have these fractions and decimals and percents for you to put in order from least to greatest. Remember that some of these are going to be repeating decimals. I have a chart for you, and you can pause and then listen to my video at the end. I'll actually do this one at the very end. And I just want to say about this is a chart that I've started so that you can actually start to memorize some of these. We talked about 2/3. 2/3 is going to be a repeating decimal of 6 repeating, and we have the percentage equivalent on this chart. The same thing goes for 1/3. It's one of those special ones that repeats. And some of these are more of the common ones that you should start to just recognize and know, like 1/4. And then I have some 5/8 and 3/8 and 1/8, and then the second row is all about fifths, which is 20, 30, 40, 60, and 80%. So some of these you should start to just memorize. It'll make your life easier as we move on through the year if you have these committed to memory. So bonus problem, you can go ahead and try it. I am going to end the video by going over this one so that you're more prepared for when we practice in class. All right, so from what I've done in other examples, I already know that this is going to be the decimal 6/10 repeated all the way through. I already know as well from example 1 that 3/5 is just 0.6. Again, I'm putting all of these into decimal form. 5/8, if I didn't have my chart on the bottom and I couldn't see that 5/8 is 0.625, how you do this, just to review, is you divide 5 by 8. We have the decimal point and we have to annex some zeros. So we have a 6 is 48. Then we annex a 0, we have 20, so that would be 2. And then we have 40, and that's where the 5 comes in. So that's how we got that decimal. So 5/8 is 0.625. We don't need to do anything for this decimal. For this percent, here's the decimal point. I have to move it over 2 places, and that will become 0.583. And then 5/6, we also have to divide 5 divided by 6 and put the decimal point up, annexing a 0. 6 times 8 is 48. We're going to take that and have a 2. And 8 times 3 is, 6 times 3 is 18. And we get another 2. Uh-oh, I'm seeing something happen again. Are you seeing it? I'm getting a bunch of 2's again. So I could keep annexing this 0 and I would still get a 20. I'd still have to put a 3 on here. That is a special kind of decimal where only the 3 will be repeating. So that's a little tricky. That's why I did this one out for you. So now I have all of my fractions and percents in decimal form. I'm actually going to erase my division so I have a little more room to order these so that you can see how to do that. But you do have to divide to find decimal equivalents. You cannot get the denominator to be a 10 or 100 or 1,000. So I have 0 and 6. Because I have 3 decimal places here, I'm going to go 3 places out with all of my numbers. And if there's nothing here, I'm going to put zeros. We have 625. We have 0.5. I'm just going to hold those places. And then 583. And then 0.83. 3, 3. Now I've listed them all like this so that now I can compare the place value places. So I'm looking down the tenths place. I have 2 of them that are in the 5/10ths category. Which one was the smallest? That would be 1/2. So when I'm ordering them, I'm going to come up to their original form. So this was a decimal. That's my smallest. What was 5.83? It was the percent. So I'm going to put 58.3% as my next number, ordering from least to greatest. Okay, and I'm going to cross off this one and this one. Now I get to look at my 6's. And the 6.0, so I'm looking at my 6's. Now I have to look to the right. My 0 is the smallest, so that was referring to 3/5. Now the next number bigger is that 2. That is referring to 5/8. So I have these 2 done, and then my 2/3 is the last number in that 6/10ths category. I have 1 left. It's the 8.3 repeated, which is 5/6. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice I'm checking them off to make sure I didn't forget one. So that is how we're going to order. When they're all different kind of forms, you need the same form. I'll see you tomorrow. Look forward to it. Have a good night.